A Ukrainian cargo plane carrying munitions to Bangladesh came down in a ball of flames in northern Greece.
The plane crash killed all 8 crew members on board. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines.
For the third consecutive week, another big-time oil price rollback awaits Pinoy motorists tomorrow. Marcos sees no need to enact a law requiring booster shots, but urges Filipinos to get boosted to protect themselves. Another U.S. shooting incident kills 4 in a mall in Indiana. Ukraine sacks security officials suspected of aiding Russia. And melt-proof ice cream hits the market amid a heat wave in Beijing.
Good news for motorists as oil companies announced a big-time oil price rollback on Tuesday, July 19. This is the third straight week of oil price cuts in the country. In separate advisories, oil companies say premium and unleaded gasoline prices will be slashed by 5 pesos per liter, diesel by 2 pesos per liter, and kerosene by 70 centavos per liter. The majority of oil companies will implement the price rollback starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow, July 19.
The country has logged 2,091 average daily COVID-19 infections in the previous week. Data from the Department of Health shows that from July 11 to July 15, the country recorded 14,460 new COVID-19 cases. The number is 44% higher than that recorded from July 4 to July 10. 35 new cases are severe and critical, while 1 is added to the number of fatalities. The additional death was from October 2021, but was included late in the country's record.
According to Octa research, the country's COVID-19 cases are projected to start slowing down by next week. Vin Pascua reports.
Metro Manila may expect a decrease in daily COVID infections by next week. This was the projection of Octa Research in an interview with Net25's ESPN or Ano sa Palagay Nyo, despite the sharp increase logged in the past weeks. Octa Research fellow Dr. Guido David says the growth rate is slowing down in the National Capital Region.
Based on sa trend nakikita natin, hopefully sa Metro Manila, pababa ng cases by next week. Of course, projections naman yan. So, hindi pa naman natin masasabing guaranteed yung mga yan. Based on the trends lang, kasi nagdi-decrease na yung positivity rate. Yung growth rate yung nagdi-decrease. Pero yung positivity rate, tumatas pa rin. Sorry. And then, pero sa Metro Manila pa lang yan. Sa ibang provinces kasi pataas pa lang yung bilang ng kaso. Like sa Cebu, tumataas pa lang. Sa Davao, tumataas pa lang. And other provinces, Bicol, tumataas pa lang.
Dr. David added that in the coming months, they also expect the COVID-19 cases to further decrease not only in Metro Manila, but also in other provinces. He said the surge was incomparable to the previous ones when the vaccine was not yet available in the country.
Siyempre, yung timing naman natin, by August 22, I expect na by then sa Metro Manila, mababa ng, or at least medyo mababa ng cases. Ganun din sa Calabarzon and Central Luzon and sa Western Visayas. Kasi dito nagsimula yung surge. Pero doon sa mga ibang areas naman, of course, hindi natin masisigurado kung mataas pa yung cases by then or tataas kasi nagsisimula pa lang tumaas yung cases sa ngayon.
Although the growth rate is slowing down, Octa noted that the hospitalization rate is slowing, climbing at 31%, but it is unlikely to reach alarming levels. Dr. David reminds the public to strictly observe health and safety protocols as the country prepares for the resumption of face-to-face classes in November.
Nakadepend rin necessarily sa trend ng COVID, yung pagbabalik sa schools. And na-mention nyo nga kanina, it's very important na makabalik na sa schools yung ating mga estudyante, mga kabataan. Kasi 2 years na sila nakakulong eh. And this is affecting our quality of education. It's also affecting the productivity ng children. So
Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Batasang Pambansa is all set for the first State of the Nation address of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Vic Somintak has the details.
1 week before the formal opening of the 19th Congress, Batasang Pambansa is all ready for the first State of the Nation address or SONA of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. House of Representatives Secretary General Mark Leandro Mendoza says they will strictly impose public health standards inside the Batasan complex, particularly in the plenary hall where the President will deliver his speech. Mendoza stressed that all attendees, including lawmakers from the Senate and House of Representatives, cabinet officials, members of the diplomatic corps, media, and invited VIP guests, will undergo antigen and RT-PCR swab tests. Despite the sharp spike in COVID-19 cases, the House leadership has allowed 100% capacity inside the 1,200-seater hall.
Sir, okay naman po tayo at we're good na po. We're ready na for the son of President BBM on Monday, July 25 po, sir. All preparations are okay na po lahat kami, sir. Yes, sir, tuloy po. Pero meron po tayong meron pong gagawin po na lahat po ng papasok ng plenary sa bubble po must present a negative RT-PCR result po.
Prior to the session's opening on July 25, the plenary hall has been renovated and health safety mechanisms have been installed to prevent COVID-19 transmission. Vic Somintak for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippine National Police will impose a no-fly, no-drone zone around Batasang Pambansa complex as a security measure for the first State of the Nation address of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. PNP National Capital Region Police Office spokesperson, Police Lieutenant Colonel Jenny Texon, says only authorized persons will be exempted from the said policy. NCRPO is set to deploy around 17,000 personnel for Monday's SONA, 1,905 from PNP support units, and 2,974 from coordinating agencies and other peacekeeping partners. The PNP will strictly exercise maximum tolerance towards protesters that have secured rally permits at designated freedom parks. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. starts attending meetings in person once again following week-long isolation because of COVID-19. The chief executive sees no need for a law requiring the public to get boosted against coronavirus. Weng De La Fuente reports.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is back on his feet again, immediately attending to his duties after completing his one-week isolation period last Friday. This afternoon, the chief executive met with Health Officer in Charge Maria Rosario Vergere to discuss COVID-19 alert levels raised in various parts of the country. This comes after the alert level 1 over Metro Manila and 84 other areas declared by former President Rodrigo Duterte expired last July 15. Amid a spike in cases, Marcos urges the public to get their booster doses.
Kukunin ko na rin ang pagkakataong ito para ihayag muli ang importansya ng pagbabakuna at lalo na ang mga booster shot. Ito nga ang pangalawang COVID ko na. Pero ang tingin ko, kung hindi dahil sa vaccine at booster shot, ay siguradong mas malubha ang naging tama ko at ang aking pakiramdam. Dahil yung aking naging simptomas ay kaunting lagnat, kaunting pangangati ng lalamunan, pero hindi na talaga siya bumaba sa aking baga at naging komplikado.
Marcos says there is no need to pass a law mandating the public to get boosted, but he emphasizes that the booster jobs will protect the public from getting serious illnesses.
Kaya yan ang mensaheng pinagtutulungan namin lahat ngayon. Sa tulong ng DOH, ng DILG, ng DepEd, isusulong ang malawakang kampanya muli para sa pagbabakuna sa booster shot. Preparasyon na rin ito sa pagbabalik ng face-to-face classes at pagluwag ng iba pang mga safety protocols. Kung magiging matagumpay ang kampanyang ito, tuloy na yan. Hindi naman talaga kailangan isabatas pa ito dahil malaya pa rin tayong mamili para sa ating sariling kalusugan. Pero habang tumatagal, ay mas lumilinaw ang sinasabi ng siyensya. Ang mga datos at ang mga pag-aaral na ang pagbabakuna ay malaki ang naitutulong para sa ating kaligtasan mula sa COVID-19.
Meanwhile, the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Infectious Diseases continues to monitor the pandemic status in the country. Aside from meeting with Department of Health OIC Vergere, the President also convened a meeting with the Department of Agriculture. Weng De La Fuente reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, in the U.S. state of Nevada, 4 dead after 2 small planes collide in Vegas airport. And hunger lingers as protest movement in Sri Lanka reaches 100 days. These and more stories from around the world when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Lahat ng mahilig magluto at kumain.
May bago at katakam-takam na cooking show dito lamang sa Net25. Ako si Patty Daza.
Ako naman si Sandy Daza.
Samahan niyo kaming magpinsan dito sa Lutong Daza.
Bukod sa masarap at abot kaya na recipes, masarap ang kwentuhan at halakhakan dito.
At syempre, laging may special celebrity guest. Kainan na! Kita-kits!
Lutong Daza
Sa Net25.
Ang morning show na always nagbibigay ng ngiti at saya sa bawat kada all over the world. Tara na't ma-inspire at ma-amaze sa kwento ng mga bawat kada na nagwagi sa anumang hamon at pagsubok ng buhay. Itago na mga remote control at tumambay lang dito sa paborito niyong barkada sa umaga, ang Kada Umaga! Dahil kayo ang bida dito.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. The U.S. has once again been rocked by another mass shooting, this time at a mall in the U.S. state of Indiana. 4 people were killed and another 2 injured Sunday night. Greenwood Mayor Mark Myers said the gunman had been shot dead by an armed individual, who he later called in a social media post as a good Samaritan who stopped further bloodshed and saved lives. According to Greenwood police, the unidentified gunman entered the mall's food court at around 6 o'clock Sunday night, carrying a rifle and several magazines of ammunition, and opened fire. They said a passerby who was lawfully carrying a firearm shot the shooter almost as soon as he began. The attack is the latest in a wave of gun violence plaguing the United States. According to Gun Violence Archive, about 40,000 deaths in the U.S. a year are caused by firearms.
4 people were killed after 2 small planes collided in midair at an airport in Las Vegas. The Federal Aviation Administration said in a statement to AFP that a single-engine Piper PA-46 plane was preparing to land at North Las Vegas Airport in the U.S. state of Nevada around noon local time when it collided with a single-engine Cessna 172. The agency said the Piper crashed in a field east of runway 30 right and the Cessna fell into a water retention pond. It also confirmed that 2 people were aboard each aircraft. An investigation is now ongoing to determine the cause of the terrible accident.
Serbian authorities have confirmed a Ukrainian cargo plane loaded with 11.5 tons of Serbian-made munitions crashed in Kavala in northern Greece en route to Bangladesh. The Antonov AN-12 plane, operated by Ukrainian airline Meridian, had reported engine trouble and requested an emergency landing not long before witnesses say it exploded in a cornfield outside the city at around midnight local time. The plane took off from Nice Airport in Serbia around 8:40 p.m. local time. Greek media confirmed that aviation authorities had lost the aircraft signal shortly after the pilot requested to make an emergency landing at Kavala Airport, citing an engine problem. According to the Brisbane Times, firefighters who arrived on the scene were hesitant to put the blaze out as a toxic smell was coming from the destroyed aircraft. Those living within a 2-kilometer radius of the crash site were told to stay inside due to the risk of potentially toxic cargo. However, Meridian General Director Denis Bogdanovich dismissed speculations that the weapons had been destined for either side of the conflict in Ukraine, telling Reuters that this is not related to Ukraine or Russia. The cargo was owned by Serbian arms trader Valir, according to Defense Minister Nebojsa Stefanovic. Now the airline and Serbian officials confirmed all 8 members of the crew perished in that accident.
In his nightly address, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, says over 650 cases of suspected treason and aiding and abetting Russia by Ukrainian security officials are currently being investigated. The investigation includes 60 cases of officials who have remained in territories occupied by Russia and are working against Ukraine. Zelensky sacked his chief prosecutor and the head of the country's security agency in the largest government shakeup since the start of Russia's special military operation. Zelensky says he was firing Prosecutor General Irina Venediktova and Security Chief Ivan Bakanov amid a high number of cases of suspected treason by Ukrainian law enforcement officials. Venediktova had led Ukraine's investigation into alleged atrocities committed by invading Russian forces in the town of Bucha outside Kyiv, which caused international outrage.
The West does not have the stockpiles of weapons needed to sustain a prolonged military campaign in Ukraine or elsewhere, Kathy Warden, one CEO of Pentagon's main defense contractors, warned. In an interview published by the Financial Times, Warden stated that the military-industrial complex therefore needs a clear demand signal from Western governments on what exactly it should produce and whether it will be purchased. Warden said existing weapon stockpiles were not designed for a prolonged conflict. However, the West is not yet running out of arms for Ukraine. The Pentagon's main contractors have been meeting several times a week to discuss efforts to supply Ukraine, and Warden explained the dialogue with the Pentagon was good and further discussions are ongoing about getting clarity on their plans. She added that the West was doing its best to pull the industry together and share those plans, both at a more general level and specific, so that contractors can get ahead of the deal, make investments, and advance. The U.S. has become Kyiv's top supplier in the ongoing conflict, allocating billions to prop up Ukraine in its fight against Russia. Moscow has repeatedly urged the West to stop pumping Ukraine with weaponry, insisting that the aid would only prolong hostilities rather than change the ultimate outcome. A months-long economic crisis has gripped the country of Sri Lanka. Impacted by rampant inflation and protests that brought down the president last week, Sri Lankans are buying less, eating less, and working less. With no foreign exchange reserves for imports and having defaulted on its $51 billion foreign debt, Sri Lanka is experiencing crippling shortages of fuel, medicines, and other essentials. According to the World Food Programme, nearly 5 million people need food aid in Sri Lanka. That is 22% of the population. In its latest assessment, it says more than 5 out of every 6 families are either skipping meals, eating less, or buying worse food. Residents say it is very difficult to live. Most of the time, they have to cut meat like fish into many small pieces so everyone in the family can eat. Sri Lanka's protest movement reached its 100th day Sunday, having forced one president from office and now turning its sights on his successor as the country's economic crisis continues. Just hours ago, Sri Lanka's acting president Ranil Wickremesinghe declared a state of emergency that gives him broad authority amid growing protests, demanding his resignation 2 days before the country's lawmakers are set to elect a new president. The emergency decree issued by Wickremesinghe invokes sanctions or sections of the Public Security Ordinance that allow him to make regulations in the interest of public security, the preservation of public order, the suppression of mutiny, riot, or civil commotion, and for the maintenance of special supplies.
Billionaire Roman Abramovich and other top Russian tycoons targeted by EU sanctions over the ongoing Ukraine war are challenging the restrictions in a European court. The businessmen, widely regarded as oligarchs in the West, allege that their rights have been infringed by the sanctions, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. Former Chelsea owner Abramovich, metals and mining magnate Alisher Usmanov, as well as Mikhail Friedman and Peter Aven, longtime bosses of Alpha Bank, have all filed separate lawsuits over the sanctions with the EU's General Court. They asked the bloc's second highest court to annul the sanctions, claiming their rights have been infringed and disputing their allegedly close ties with the Kremlin. According to the report, Abramovich, for instance, has cited his Portuguese citizenship in the filings, claiming that the EU sanctions have breached fundamental rights supposedly protected by the bloc itself. The report also said that some of the oligarchs are even seeking damages from the EU. The damages, however, appear to be more symbolic rather than practical. Abramovich is seeking the European Council to pay over $1 million to a charity set up to receive the proceeds of the sale of Chelsea Football Club. Usmanov and his sister are also seeking payments of about $20,000 to cover legal costs. Earlier this week, Bloomberg reported, citing sources, that the EU considers removing the restrictions it has imposed on some Russian nationals. The bloc's lawyers have reportedly admitted that some of the requests filed by the sanctioned Russians might have merit, and the restrictions against them had been imposed based on either weak, dated, or outright false evidence. Marked for death by former Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prema Kumar Gunaratina survived abduction and torture. But the veteran activist says his role in the campaign to oust the leader was not personal. The 56-year-old Gunaratina, who in his youth raided an army camp during a Marxist uprising, was snatched by armed gunmen near his home in Colombo a decade ago and was held in a secret location for 4 days before an international pressure campaign secured his unexpected release.
2012, he abducted me and he wanted to assassinate me, and actually at that time Australian government involved in that matter, and they helped me a lot to save my life. But this is not personal actually. He is one of the key responsible personnel for that abductions and disappearances, and he is one of the responsible person for the war crimes as well, as at that time he was the Defense Secretary under Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's presidency. So therefore, I think this is a win for the democracy in Lanka.
Gunaratna wants to point out to the international community that their group is not for armed struggle, but they are fighting for democracy. He also states that Sri Lanka needs a commission to find the stolen money and to bring them to justice for war crimes as well as illegal abductions and disappearances.
The New York City Health Department opens 3 mass vaccination sites providing the monkeypox vaccine. NYC Health Commissioner Dr. Ashwin Vasan says there is technology to manage the demand, but it is all about supply.
But as you can see, 9,200 appointments went in about 7 minutes. So demand is significant. We think we have the technology now to manage that demand, but at the end of the day, it's about supply. I understand frustration. We're frustrated with the amount of supply that we have of this vaccine. I described earlier that we're not doing all the appointments through the public-facing booking website because we're trying to take into account the needs of people who might not have the internet.
The United States is forecasting an increase in monkeypox cases in the coming weeks. Concern has grown especially in New York, the epicenter of the U.S. outbreak of the virus, with nearly 390 cases counted as of July 14. The illness is characterized by lesions on the skin, which can appear on the genitals or the mouth, and is often accompanied by fever, sore throat, and pain in the lymph nodes. It usually clears up on its own, but can be extremely painful. The U.S. has seen a total of 1,470 cases. Later in the news, U.S. President Biden's fist bump with the Crown Prince of Saudi triggers backlash. The Philippines bags award at the Global Summit of Women 2022. And forest fires rage across Europe as heat wave sends temperatures soaring. All these and more when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by This portion.
We are now back here on Mata ng Agila International. Conservative rivals have clashed over various policy areas in their bid to be the new UK Prime Minister. From the United Kingdom, Aribel Celestino reports.
Barbs flew and derisive laughter rang out as the Conservative contenders battling to succeed Prime Minister Boris Johnson clashed in a live TV debate on Sunday, heading into a pivotal week for the acrimonious race. Rising global temperatures were among the policy areas under contention after Britain's Climate Minister COP26. President Alok Sharma threatened to resign if the winner retreats from the government's net zero target, with Britain facing a record-breaking heat wave this week and dire warnings of loss of life. Only front-runner Rishi Sunak pledged to maintain green taxes to help pay for the legally enshrined aim of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Former Finance Minister Sunak was repeatedly assailed by the four other contenders in the ITV debate, the second of three before the two finalists are submitted to Tory rank-and-file members who will decide their new leader by September 5. But he shot back with some of the debate's most winning lines, attacking Foreign Secretary Liz Truss for her promises of a borrowing binge to fund tax cuts and help ease cost of living prices. This something-for-nothing economics isn't conservatism, it's socialism, he said.
This something-for-nothing economics isn't conservative, it's socialism.
From the United Kingdom, I am Aribel Celestino for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Former British Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, the front-runner to become Britain's next Prime Minister, has family ties to a technology partner of the World Economic Forum, according to the National Pulse news site. The National Pulse added that the WEF has advocated for a Chinese Communist Party-style economy complete with trackable digital identities and currency. Sunak topped the second round of voting by Conservative members of Parliament in the Tory leadership race on July 15th, following Boris Johnson's resignation. He is widely considered a neoliberal or globalist candidate. Now, the father of Sunak's wife, Akshata Murthy, is the founder of Infosys, an Indian information technology company that provides services to a host of Fortune 500 companies and banks. Infosys is listed as an official partner of the WEF, which has been accused of seeking to develop the technological infrastructure to implement a global social credit score system. The news site also said Sunak himself has a history of being soft on China, telling The Telegraph that he wanted a complete sea change in relations with the Chinese Communist Party in favor of increased trade ties and economic collaboration. Moreover, according to the National Pulse, China in turn has endorsed Sunak's candidacy.
During COVID times, the fist bump has been seen as a more hygienic alternative to the handshake. However, barely a day into his visit to Saudi Arabia, U.S. President Joe Biden's fist bump with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has created a backlash against the American leader. In 2019, Biden vowed to make the Desert Kingdom a pariah over its human rights record. U.S. intelligence officials believe the Crown Prince, Saudi Arabia's de facto leader, approved the 2018 operation that led to the killing and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Taken outside a palace in the Red Sea coastal city of Jeddah, the fist bump image was immediately distributed by official Saudi news outlets before doing the rounds on social media. It eventually landed on the front page of the Washington Post, where Khashoggi was a contributing columnist. At the start of the tour, his communications team said Biden would limit physical contact with those he met, citing coronavirus concerns. Some journalists immediately speculated that the measures were motivated less by public health and more by fear of an awkward photo op with Prince Mohammed, often referred to by his initials MBS. The Post CEO Fred Ryan says the first bump was worse than a handshake. It was shameful. He says it projected a level of intimacy and comfort that delivers to MBS the unwarranted redemption he has been desperately seeking. When asked if he regrets the fist bump with the Saudi Crown Prince, Biden says, and these are his words, "Why don't you guys talk about something that matters? I'm happy to answer a question that matters." He was speaking briefly to reporters after returning to the White House Saturday evening following his Middle East trip. Russia's blockade of Ukrainian ports threatens grain supplies to tens of thousands of people vulnerable to starvation and must end, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell warned.
I hope, and I think I have a hope, that this week it will be possible to reach an agreement to deblock Odessa and other Ukrainian ports. The life of thousands, more than thousands, tens of thousands of people depends on this agreement. So it's not a diplomatic game. It's some issue of life and death for many human beings.
Russian and Ukrainian negotiators will meet UN and Turkish diplomats in Istanbul this Wednesday to discuss a possible agreement to end the months-long blockade of Ukraine's ports. Borrell said the most worrisome thing is the lack of food in many countries around the world, and there is no food because Russia is blocking the export of Ukrainian grain.
Perspective for you to address this issue.
He said that if Wednesday's UN talks failed, Brussels would continue to blame Russia for using the threat of starvation as a weapon in its conflict. Meanwhile, NATO member Turkey, on speaking terms with both Russia and Ukraine, has spearheaded efforts to resume the grain deliveries. Turkish officials say they have 20 merchant ships waiting in the Black Sea that could be loaded quickly with Ukrainian grain. But a Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman stressed that Moscow would attend the meeting with a list of firm demands, including the right to search grain ships for weapons. Ukraine, on the other hand, has its own list of demands for security guarantees and has emphasized the importance of the UN's role in brokering the talks.
In Guatemala, hundreds mourn and bury Maya indigenous teenager Melvin Guachiac in a village. The 13-year-old and other 52 migrants were found dead in a tractor trailer where they had been abandoned without air conditioning in the sweltering Texas heat. Melvin's father, Casimiro, says he was asked if he would try to return to the United States if he wanted to go back. Casimiro says with a visa, he will.
Texas state lawmakers once again slammed law enforcement's slow response to the shooting in Uvalde, where a gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers. The lawmakers charged that the situation was chaotic due to the officers' lackadaisical approach to subduing the gunman. In a preliminary report, the southern U.S. state's House of Representatives says that a total of 376 law enforcers, including border guards, state police, city police, local sheriff departments, and elite forces, responded to the May 24 massacre at Robb Elementary School. The report says the 73 minutes that elapsed between the first officer's arrival and the shooter's death was an unacceptably long period of time. A void of leadership and a failure to adhere to active shooting training was also cited by the report. Texas lawmaker Justin Burrows summed up the investigators' findings.
But if we need a simple phrase to describe what the report says, again, I would tell you multiple systemic failures.
Back here in the Philippines, the majority of Filipinos trust the results of the 2022 national and local elections. That's according to a recently published Pulse Asia survey. Here's Weng de la Fuente with the details.
More than 80% of Filipinos believe the May 9 election results are accurate and credible based on the survey released today by Pulse Asia. In its June 24 to June 27 survey, more than 1 month after the elections, 82% of the respondents say they have big trust in the outcome of the polls. At the Voice of the Filipino People, a post-elections assessment briefing, Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes says only 4% of the respondents expressed distrust, while 14% were undecided on the issue. 67% of respondents also believed in the credibility of the elections, while 18% said they were as credible as the previous ones. In the said Pulse Asia survey, 39% of the respondents said election fraud decreased, while 16% believed that election fraud still transpired. Meanwhile, 86% of the respondents cited the faster release of election results. While there have been issues with vote counting machines during the elections, 89% said they were satisfied with the automated voting system, while 4% were dissatisfied. The May elections witnessed history unfold as President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. garnered more than 31 million votes, while Vice President Sara Duterte got more than 32 million votes, making them the first candidates to win the majority of Filipino votes post-EDSA revolution. The survey was participated by 1,200 respondents nationwide with a positive-negative 2.8% error margin at the 95% confidence level. Weng De La Fuente reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Office of the Solicitor General considers challenging the plan of the International Criminal Court to revive its investigation of the war on drugs under the Duterte administration. Moira Encina has the details.
The Office of the Solicitor General will consult Malacanang and other concerned departments about the country's position on plans by the International Criminal Court, or ICC, to reopen its investigation of the drug war killings. But Solicitor General Menardo Guevara says one of the options that OSG is considering is to challenge the jurisdiction of the ICC in the country. Guevara made a statement in reaction to the invitation of ICC judges to the government of the Philippines to comment on the ICC prosecutor's request to continue its anti-drug campaign probe. The country was given until September 8 to submit its position. Guevara says another option is to maintain an open communication between the country and the ICC. Nonetheless, the OSG will give its final answer after consultations with the Office of the President, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Justice, and international law experts. Justice Secretary Casmin Remulla earlier said that the country was no longer part of the ICC. Moira Encina reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The International Criminal Court has asked the Marcos administration to comment on reviving its investigation of the previous administration's war on drugs. One of the respondents on the issue, Senator Ronald De La Rosa, says he will not cooperate on the ICC probe. Mayan Corvera reports.
Senator Ronald De La Rosa suspects that an organization or a personality is behind the move to revive the investigation of the International Criminal Court into the war on drugs under the Duterte administration. The ICC earlier requested the government of the Philippines to comment on its plan to investigate allegations of human rights violations related to the war on drugs. ICC gave the current administration until September 8 to submit its position on the matter. De La Rosa said the probe on anti-drug campaign already ended, but he's wondering why it's being revived.
Find out natin, basta mayroon yan. Tagal na yan, namatay na yan na issue, ngayon bumabalik na naman. Possible? Meron silang, parang meron silang acts to grind against us. Pero basta lahat yan galit sa ginagawa nating war on drugs. Whether politiko yan or drug lord, drug syndicate. Basta galit sila sa nangyaring war on drugs. Ikaw galit ka ba sa ginawa nating war on drugs? Hindi ka naman siguro galit.
The senator was former chief of the Philippine National Police said he's not afraid of the investigation, but he has no plans to cooperate with the ICC. He insisted that it cannot act as the Supreme Court or the Department of Justice.
Gusto nga kong sa Bisaya pa yung isok pa. ihawing sa sariling apoy. Opo. Hindi naman siguro. Alam mo naman na hindi nila alam kung ano nangyari dito sa atin. Hindi nila alam kung anong problema natin dito. Bakit sila magkikialam? Di ba? Oo. Harap ako, magpatry ako before a Filipino court, not a foreign court. Kahit sinong Pilipino dyan na up to the Supreme Court, I will gladly face them kung ako i-charge nila whatever crimes na i-charge na sa akin. Pero harap ako doon sa isang korte na composed of foreigners, mga puti, hindi ako papayag. Dito ako, harap ako sa ating sarili court. Dahil meron tayong korte. Unless hindi nagpapangsyon yung ating korte, then pwede siguro sila magkialam.
De La Rosa, who implemented the war on drugs of the Duterte administration, said the campaign had a positive result as it cleansed the city of drug addicts and narco-politicians. For Senator Nancy Binay, the country should follow the due course of the ICC investigation as it will undergo a legal process.
The interest of transparency, kung wala naman talaga, di ba, kahit anong kalkalin nila, kung wala naman talagang basis, di mapagod sila ng kakahanap, di ba? So, para sa akin, let us follow kung ano ba yung, legal process. So, and kung wala talagang personality din naman yung ICC.
Mayan Corvera reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippines won the Ministerial Awards 2022 for gender-responsive economic actions for the transformation of women, or Great Women Project 2, at the Global Summit of Women recently held in Bangkok, Thailand. The Philippines is the main sponsor and principal behind the annual Ministerial Award, One Project, presented by 23 ministers at the Ministerial Roundtable. The primary criteria for the award are the principle of best practice and public-private partnership as a solution to the global challenges for women and girls. Undersecretary Sandra Montano, chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Women, accepted the award. PCW, along with Global Affairs Canada and other partner agencies, worked with 831 women entrepreneurs to help grow their businesses in these challenging times, which resulted in an increase in sales and assets and improved environmental management practices by at least 50%.
Because of the lockdown pandemic, we helped all the entrepreneurs, 800 of them, plus the 10,000 employees. We were able to have the digital store, the online store, which we are all enjoying right now. So,
Firefighters are battling to contain wildfires sweeping across southwest Europe. The heat wave there shows no signs of abating, with Britain poised to set new temperature records this coming week. Blazes raging in France, Greece, Portugal, and Spain have destroyed thousands of hectares of land and forced thousands of residents to flee. The fires have killed several emergency personnel just last week. It is the second heat wave to engulf parts of southwest Europe in weeks. Scientists blame climate change and predict more frequent and intense episodes of extreme weather, such as heat waves and drought. The wildfires forced more than 16,000 people, residents and tourists combined, to decamp. 7 emergency shelters have been set up for evacuees. Coming up, as recession looms in the U.S., Microsoft lets go of workers and Google slows hiring. President Marcos lauds the Philippine national women's football team on their historic AFF Women's Championship win. And just why won't this ice cream melt even when burnt? Find out when Mata ng Agila International returns.
ngayong linggo sa Cine Throwback.
Sino mo kailangan dyan? Nakaganda nga.
This portion is brought to you by Source Alliance.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the crypto ecosystem expanded by 2,300% between September 2019 and June 2021, especially in developing countries. The UN believes that the main reasons for the increased use of crypto in developing countries are the attractive speed and price of sending remittances, as well as the perception of cryptocurrencies as a way to protect household savings. Cryptocurrencies are mainly held by middle-income people in developing countries, particularly in countries facing currency depreciation and rising inflation. The said research found that Ukraine is the global leader with 12.7% of its residents having exposure to crypto, while Russia is second with 11.9%. Venezuela and Singapore come in third and fourth with 10.3% and 9.4% respectively. Kenya closes the top five, where 8.5% of the population, or 4.25 million people, own digital currencies, which is the highest adoption rate in Africa.
Google and Microsoft are cutting back on new hires as the inflation-plagued U.S. economy threatens to tip into a full-on recession. Google CEO Sundar Pichai announced in a staff email that hiring would slow for the remainder of the year. Pichai particularly cited the threat of economic recession in his email to Google staff. As cited by the media, he explained that the company will focus on engineering, technical, and other critical roles for the rest of the year and for 2023 in the face of an uncertain global economic outlook. Microsoft, meanwhile, laid workers off across multiple divisions and offices, even as it insisted it would boost headcount over the next year. The company says they will evaluate their business priorities on a regular basis and make structural adjustments accordingly. The two mega corporations are far from being the only industry giants trimming the fat in the face of gathering economic clouds. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, has cut its new hire targets by 30%, with CEO Mark Zuckerberg reportedly telling employees the social media behemoth is suffering one of the worst downturns it has seen in recent history.
President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. praised the Philippine national women's football team for bagging the country's first ASEAN Football Federation Women's Football Championship last night. In a social media post, Marcos shared a photo of the Filipino team with the caption, "Congratulations on this historic victory." The Philippines forged history anew as it claimed the country's first ever international title in the said competition. The Philippine lady footballers defeated the powerhouse team of Thailand with a score of 3-0. Prior to this victory, the Philippine team also defeated the defending champion Vietnam in the semifinals round with a deafening score of 4-0. Thousands of supporters witnessed the history-making final sports competition.
Are you excited to check out the new Dragon Ball Super movie? Luckily, we won't have to wait any longer. Toei Animation just unveiled the complete list of international release dates for Dragon Ball Super Superhero. Tickets for the new film will go on sale beginning July 22 in North America. Then fans will just have to wait for a few weeks before they can Kamehameha with Gohan and Piccolo as the super duo takes center stage and unlock new forms of powers to save the Earth. The movie will kick off in Australia and other parts of the world on August 18 before reaching the US, Canada, and the UK, among others, on August 19. The Philippines gets to enjoy the latest Dragon Ball movie on August 31. Dragon Ball is one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. The series is created by Akira Toriyama in 1984.
A Chinese ice cream brand dubbed as the Hermes of ice cream has come under fire after internet users said some of its products defy logic or common sense. Take a look. Ice cream products, or zhongzhui gao in Chinese, take abnormally longer than normal to melt from the regular heat from the environment. It is the most expensive ice cream in the country, costing 66 yuan or $10. But Ice Cream's products have sparked debates online, prompting users to question the company's ingredients. The company says its products are in line with national food safety regulations, adding that the non-melting ice cream's unique recipe includes a red seaweed extract of carrageenan, which makes it longer to melt. Wang Silu, a senior national food inspector, also say the products used to thicken the ice cream are safe. Works of two promising pottery artists charm art lovers in Townsville, a city in Queensland, Australia. To tell us more about the exhibit, here's Morgan Goodfellow.
The Townsville Studio of Contemporary Arts is home to many well-renowned artists. Catherine and Warren Ogden are no exception as they present their exhibition here today, Presence. Catherine Ogden is a potter and artist based in Townsville. She holds a diploma of visual art from the Barrier Reef Institute of TAFE and has participated in masterclass workshops with other prestigious ceramic artists. Warren Ogden is a largely self-taught and experimental potter who has been working with clay for over a decade. His ceramic vessels draw influence from ancient pottery, including Japanese pots and wood-fired pots. Catherine and Warren Ogden's latest body of functional and figurative ceramic works engage viewers with a sense of time, process, history, and alchemy. The calm state of the exhibition commands the space, carrying the histories of the work's creation and materiality. Morgan Goodfellow, Townsville, Australia, Mata Nang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Well, here's what happened today in history. In 1886, Federico B. Sarabia was born in Calibo, Aklan. He was the first ever optometrist in the Philippines, being the holder of Professional Regulatory Commission of Optometry Certificate number 1. He would later establish his clinic in Escolta, marking the first Sarabia Optical in Manila. Today, Sarabia Optical is one of the biggest and most modern optical firms in the country. In 1918, Nelson Mandela was born in Veso, South Africa. Aside from being the first democratically elected president of South Africa, he was known for helping end the apartheid system, or the racial segregation in the country, and start a peaceful transition to majority rule. In 2009, the United Nations declared July 18 as Nelson Mandela International Day. And in 1976, Nadia Comaneci of Romania became the first Olympic gymnast to get a perfect score. She was then 14 years old, competing at her first Olympics in Montreal. Her 30-second routine on the uneven bars was so perfect that the judges awarded her a 10.
And before we conclude tonight's broadcast, here's a quote from Joshua Marine, an American author. Challenges are what make life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful.
I just love that. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates in our social media channels. I'm CJ Harold.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.